My name is Clara Sanson, and 2 days after my 70th birthday, my children gave me a gift that was meant to kill me. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start with Christmas morning, when everything still seemed perfect in my beautiful Connecticut home. The snow had been falling since midnight, dusting the colonial mansion that my late husband William and I had called home for 35 years. The house looked like something from a Christmas card, ivy-wrapped brick, mullioned windows glowing warmly against the winter landscape, smoke curling from 3 chimneys into the crisp December air. Inside, my dining room sparkled with crystal and candlelight. The mahogany table that had hosted countless family celebrations was set for 6, myself, my 3 children, and their spouses. Fresh pine garlands wound around the chandelier, and the scent of cinnamon and cloves from my mulled wine filled the air. I stood in the kitchen, adjusting my pearl necklace. A nervous habit I'd developed since William's death 6 months ago, and surveyed the feast I'd prepared. Prime rib with Yorkshire pudding, roasted vegetables from my garden, the apple tart recipe William's mother had taught me 40 years ago. Everything perfect, everything just as it had always been. "Mother, you've outdone yourself," said Thomas, my eldest at 42, as he carved the roast with the precision of a surgeon. He'd inherited William's steady hands along with his law practice, though not his warmth. "It smells divine, Clara," added Victoria, Thomas's wife, though her smile never quite reached her eyes. Victoria had always been polite but distant, treating me like an elderly relative to be tolerated rather than embraced. My daughter Patricia, 39 and recently divorced, barely looked up from her phone. "The Instagram influencers would kill for this aesthetic, Mom. Very cozy grandmother vibes." Cozy grandmother vibes. As if my entire existence could be reduced to a social media trend. My youngest, James, 36, at least seemed genuinely pleased. "This is why I moved back to Connecticut, Mom. Nobody does Christmas like you." James had always been my favorite, though I'd never admitted it aloud. Perhaps because he reminded me most of William. Gentle eyes, quick smile, and a way of making everyone around him feel valued. His wife Sarah nodded in agreement, bouncing their 2-year-old daughter Emma on her lap. "Before we eat," Victoria announced, standing with theatrical flourish, "we have something special for you, Clara." She disappeared into the foyer and returned with an elegant gift box wrapped in silver paper and tied with a wine-colored ribbon. "This is from all of us," she said, setting it before me with ceremony. "Something we thought you'd really appreciate." I untied the ribbon carefully. I'd always been the type to save wrapping paper. And opened the box to reveal a bottle of wine nested in tissue paper. Not just any wine. A 1982 Bordeaux, Chateau Margaux, the label pristine and the wax seal intact. "My goodness," I breathed, lifting the bottle reverently. "This must have cost a fortune." "Only the best for you, Mother," Thomas said, though something in his tone felt rehearsed. "We know how much you and Dad loved collecting wine." It was true. William and I had spent decades building a collection in our climate-controlled cellar, hunting for special vintages during our trips to France and Italy. This bottle would have been the crown jewel of our collection. "It's beautiful," I said, setting it carefully on the sideboard. "But you children shouldn't have spent so much." "Don't worry about the cost," Patricia said, still scrolling through her phone. "We can afford it." There was something odd about the way she said it, but I dismissed the thought. Perhaps she was still bitter about her divorce settlement, or stressed about her consulting business that never seemed to generate much actual income. We ate dinner by candlelight, discussing safe topics, Emma's latest words, James's promotion at the marketing firm, Thomas's latest court victory. The conversation felt slightly stilted, but I attributed it to the natural awkwardness that had settled over family gatherings since William's death. He'd been our anchor, our center of gravity. Without him, we were all still learning how to relate to each other. After dinner, as I was clearing plates, Victoria cornered me in the kitchen. Clara, that wine we gave you, it's really quite rare. You might want to save it for a very special occasion. Of course, dear. I was thinking I might open it on William's birthday next month, toast his memory properly. Victoria's face went pale. Oh, well, perhaps you should save it even longer than that. Maybe for your birthday next year, or… Victoria, are you feeling all right? You look upset. I'm fine, she said quickly. Just tired. Long day. But she didn't look fine. She looked terrified. Later that evening, after everyone had gone home, I sat in William's study nursing a brandy and thinking about the strange undercurrents I'd sensed all day. Victoria's reaction to my plans for the wine. Patricia's distracted behavior. Even Thomas had seemed calculating somehow. I walked to the sideboard where the wine bottle sat, lifting it again to admire the label. 1982 had been an exceptional year for Bordeaux, and Chateau Margaux was legendary. This bottle was probably worth $3,000 or more. My children had been generous, but generosity from Thomas, Patricia, and Victoria was unusual enough to be suspicious. They weren't cruel people, but they weren't particularly thoughtful either. Their Christmas gifts to me were typically perfunctory. Expensive scarves, generic jewelry, gift certificates to stores I never shopped at. This wine was different. This wine was personal, meaningful. It showed deep knowledge of my interests and genuine care for my happiness. Or did it? I set the bottle back down and picked up my phone, dialing the number for my dear friend Margaret Walsh, who lived 2 towns over. Margaret, it's Clara. I hope I'm not calling too late. Never too late for you, darling. How was Christmas with the children? Lovely, actually. They gave me a beautiful bottle of wine, 1982 Chateau Margaux. I was wondering, would you and Edmund like to come for dinner tomorrow night? I thought we might open it together. Toast William's memory. Margaret's delighted acceptance warmed my heart. She and Edmund had been our closest friends for 20 years, and they understood the significance of good wine shared with people you love. After I hung up, I felt better about the day. Perhaps I'd been reading too much into my children's behavior. Grief made everything seem suspicious, every interaction loaded with hidden meaning. I was probably just being a paranoid old woman. How wrong I was. The next morning, Victoria called at 7 a.m., her voice bright with artificial cheer. Clara, good morning. I was just thinking about that lovely wine we gave you yesterday. Are you planning to open it soon? As a matter of fact, yes. Margaret and Edmund are coming for dinner tonight, and I thought… Victoria's interruption was so sharp it made me drop my coffee mug. I mean, Clara, you really shouldn't open that wine just yet. It needs more time to settle. From the transportation, you know. Transportation? The bottle had traveled 10 miles from whatever store they'd bought it at. Victoria, wine doesn't need to settle from transportation. Especially not wine that's been aging for 40 years. Well, the man at the wine shop, said, Clara, please just wait a few more days before opening it. Promise me. The desperation in her voice was unmistakable now. This wasn't about wine settling or proper aging. This was fear. Victoria, is there something you need to tell me about this wine? Of course not. It's so special, and I want you to enjoy it at exactly the right moment. Maybe wait until New Year's Eve. That would be perfect, wouldn't it? New Year's Eve. 10 days away. Why was Victoria so desperate to delay my opening this bottle? I'll think about it, I said carefully. Thank you for your concern. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen staring at the wine bottle on the counter. In the morning light, it looked innocent enough. Deep green glass, elegant label, unbroken seal. But Victoria's panic had transformed it into something sinister. I picked up the bottle and examined it more closely. The label was pristine, but was it too pristine? The wax seal looked authentic, but I was no expert in wine authentication. The weight felt right, but I set it down and reached for my phone again, this time calling the most expensive wine shop in Hartford. Yes, I'm calling about a 1982 Chateau Margaux that may have been purchased from your store recently. Could you check your records for any sales in the past week? The clerk was helpful, but the answer was definitive. They hadn't sold any 1982 Chateau Margaux in the past 6 months. In fact, they only had 2 bottles in inventory, and both were reserved for specific customers. I tried 3 more wine shops in the area. None had sold a 1982 Chateau Margaux recently. So where had my children acquired this expensive, rare bottle of wine? More importantly, why was Victoria so desperate to prevent me from opening it? I spent the rest of the morning pacing my house, my mind racing through possibilities. Perhaps they'd bought it online, or from a private collector. Perhaps Victoria was simply anxious about me drinking such expensive wine casually instead of saving it for a monumentally special occasion. But her fear had been real, palpable, the kind of terror that comes from knowing a terrible secret. By noon, I'd made a decision that would save my life and destroy my family. I called Margaret and canceled dinner. Then I picked up the wine bottle and walked to my basement, to the climate-controlled cellar where William and I had stored our collection for decades. I placed the bottle on a high shelf, behind several other bottles, where it would be safe and forgotten. If my children had given me this wine as a gesture of love, it would wait safely until I was ready to appreciate it properly. If they had given it to me for any other reason, well, time would tell. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done since William's death. I made an appointment with our family attorney, Harold Morrison, for the next morning. It was time to review my will. Harold Morrison had been our family attorney for 25 years, handling everything from William's business contracts to our estate planning. He was a man of quiet competence and absolute discretion, qualities I desperately needed as I sat in his leather-appointed office the day after Christmas. "Clara, you look lovely as always," Harold said, settling behind his mahogany desk. "Though I have to say, I'm surprised to hear from you so soon after William's passing. Is everything all right?" I touched my pearl necklace, a gesture that had become automatic when I was nervous or thinking deeply. "Harold, I need you to walk me through my current will. Every detail, every beneficiary, every contingency." His bushy eyebrows rose slightly. "Has something happened with the children?" "I'm not sure yet. That's what I'm trying to figure out." For the next hour, Harold methodically reviewed the estate plan William and I had crafted over the years. The house and its contents would go to my children in equal shares. The investment portfolio, worth approximately $8 million, would be divided among them as well. There were smaller bequests to charity and our longtime housekeeper, Mrs. Patterson. "And the Hawaii properties?" I asked. "Those are held in the Sampson Family Trust, which you control completely during your lifetime. Upon your death, they would pass to your children as well." Harold flipped through several pages. "Current market value is approximately $4 million. So my children stand to inherit roughly $12 million when I die. Yes, though with your excellent health and family longevity, that's likely many years away." Excellent health. I was 70 years old, a widow living alone in a large house. To most people, including my children, I probably looked fragile and declining. "Harold, I want to make some changes to my will." "What kind of changes?" I'd been thinking about this all night, lying awake in the bed I'd shared with William for 35 years. "I want to add some conditions. Performance requirements for my children to receive their inheritance." Harold set down his pen and looked at me seriously. "Clara, that's usually not advisable. Performance clauses in wills often lead to family disputes and legal challenges." "What if I don't care about family disputes anymore?" The question hung in the air between us. Harold had known me as half of a devoted couple, a supportive mother, a woman who prioritized family harmony above all else. This new version of Clara Sanson, suspicious, strategic, potentially ruthless, was foreign to both of us. "Tell me what you're thinking," he said finally. "I want my children to prove they deserve their inheritance. Not through grand gestures or dramatic changes, but through simple human decency. Visiting me regularly, including me in their lives. Treating me with respect rather than viewing me as an inconvenience to be managed." Harold nodded slowly. "That's reasonable, though difficult to define legally." "Then let's define it legally. Monthly visits. Phone calls twice a week. Inclusion in family celebrations and major decisions. If they can't manage basic filial respect, they forfeit their inheritance. And if they forfeit it, where does the money go?" I've been thinking about that too. Medical research. Specifically, research into diseases that affect elderly people. If my children can't be bothered to care for their aging mother properly, maybe they can contribute to helping other people care for theirs. Harold began making notes, his expression thoughtful. "Clara, can I ask what prompted this? Yesterday, you were the same loving mother you've always been. Today you're talking about conditional inheritances and performance requirements." I reached into my purse and pulled out a photograph I'd taken of the wine bottle with my phone. "My children gave me this for Christmas. It's worth several $1,000s, which is unusual generosity from them." When I mentioned opening it to toast William's memory, my daughter-in-law became hysterical, begging me to wait. I set the phone on his desk. "I've called every wine shop in the area. None of them sold this bottle recently." Harold studied the image. "So where did they get it?" "That's one question. The other question is why Victoria is so desperate to prevent me from drinking it." Understanding dawned in Harold's eyes. He'd been practicing law long enough to recognize the shape of family betrayal, even when it came wrapped in Christmas paper. "Clara, you don't really think." "I don't know what to think. But I've lived 70 years, Harold. I've learned to trust my instincts when something feels wrong. Have you considered having the wine tested?" The thought had occurred to me, but I dismissed it as paranoia. Now, sitting in Harold's office with my suspicions laid out logically, it seemed like simple prudence. Who would do that? And what would I tell them I was looking for? I know a private laboratory that handles sensitive matters discreetly. They can test for a wide range of substances without asking questions about why you need to know. Harold wrote down a name and phone number on his letterhead. Dr. Patricia Vance. She's helped us with several cases involving suspected tampering or adulteration. Very professional, very confidential. I folded the paper and put it in my purse next to my car keys and reading glasses, the accessories of an elderly woman that my children probably thought made me helpless. "Now, about the will changes," Harold continued. "How quickly do you want to implement them?" "Immediately. If my children are planning something, I want them to discover the consequences sooner rather than later." "And if they're not planning anything? If this is all a misunderstanding?" I thought about Victoria's panic, about Patricia's distracted behavior, about Thomas's calculating looks during Christmas dinner. Then they'll easily meet the conditions and nothing will change except that I'll get to spend more time with my family. Harold spent the next hour drafting modifications to my will. When we finished, my children's inheritance was contingent on treating me like a human being rather than an inconvenience. They had to visit at least twice a month, call twice a week, and include me in major family decisions. Failure to meet these requirements for more than 60 days would result in complete disinheritance. "There's one more thing," I said as Harold prepared the final documents. "I don't want my children to know about these changes yet. Can you keep this confidential until we know what we're dealing with?" "Of course. Attorney-client privilege protects all our conversations." As I drove home from Harold's office, I felt something I hadn't experienced since William's death, a sense of purpose. For 6 months, I'd been drifting through my days, going through the motions of living while feeling like I was waiting for something to end. Now I was waiting for something to begin. That afternoon, I called Dr. Patricia Vance's laboratory and made an appointment for the following morning. I told her receptionist I needed a comprehensive analysis of a wine sample for personal reasons. The receptionist didn't ask any questions. That evening, I had dinner alone in my dining room, the same room where my children had presented me with their Christmas gift. The wine bottle sat on the sideboard, innocent and elegant, catching the light from the chandelier. I raised my glass of water in a mock toast. "Here's to family," I said to the empty room, "and to finding out what family really means." Outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing my house and garden in pristine white, beautiful and peaceful, but underneath, the ground was frozen solid. Some things that look pure and innocent are actually cold and lifeless. I was about to find out which category my children belonged to. Dr. Patricia Vance's laboratory occupied a converted warehouse in an industrial section of Hartford, the kind of place you drive past without noticing unless you had specific business there. I parked between a florist's van and a plumber's truck, feeling slightly ridiculous as I walked toward the unmarked entrance, carrying a wine bottle and a paper bag. Dr. Vance was younger than I'd expected, perhaps 40, with steel-gray hair pulled into a severe bun and wire-rimmed glasses that made her look more like a librarian than a forensic scientist. Her laboratory was pristine and modern, filled with equipment I didn't recognize but that looked expensive and precise. "Mrs. Sampson," she said, shaking my hand with a firm grip. "Harold Morrison explained that you need a comprehensive analysis of this wine sample. Can you tell me what specifically concerns you?" I set the bottle on her stainless steel counter, feeling foolish. "I have reason to believe it may have been tampered with." Dr. Vance's expression didn't change. In her line of work, she'd probably heard stranger requests than an elderly woman asking to have Christmas wine tested for poison. "What kind of tampering are you concerned about?" "I don't know. That's what I need you to tell me." She examined the bottle, turning it in the light and studying the seal. "This appears to be an expensive vintage. May I ask why you suspect it's been adulterated?" I explained about the Christmas gift, my children's unusual generosity, Victoria's panic when I'd mentioned opening it. Dr. Vance listened without interruption, making occasional notes. "I can test for a wide range of toxic substances," she said when I finished. "Heavy metals, organic poisons, synthetic compounds. The process will take 48 hours and cost $1,200. $1,200 to confirm or disprove my suspicions about my own children. Money well spent, regardless of the outcome." "How do we do this without compromising the evidence?" I asked. Dr. Vance smiled, the first time her professional facade had cracked. "You're thinking like a detective, Mrs. Sampson. We'll extract a small sample through the cork using a specialized needle. The bottle will appear untouched." 2 hours later, I drove home with the wine bottle, now secretly sampled, knowing I'd have my answers by Thursday. I spent the next 2 days in a strange state of suspended animation, going through my normal routines while my mind raced through possibilities. If the wine was clean, I'd feel foolish but relieved. If it contained something dangerous, the call came Wednesday evening while I was reading in William's study. "Mrs. Sampson, this is Dr. Vance. We've completed our analysis, and I think we should meet in person to discuss the results." Her tone told me everything I needed to know. "It's positive, isn't it? I'd prefer to discuss the details in person. Can you come in tomorrow morning?" Thursday morning found me back in Dr. Vance's sterile laboratory, my hands shaking slightly as she spread test results across her counter. "Mrs. Sampson, the wine contains significant levels of ricin." Ricin. Even I knew what that was, a deadly poison derived from castor beans, favored by assassins because it was nearly undetectable and mimicked natural illness. "How much?" I asked, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. Enough to kill someone your size within 24 to 48 hours. The symptoms would appear gradually: nausea, vomiting, difficulty breathing. Most doctors would assume food poisoning or flu until it was too late. I sat down heavily in the chair Dr. Vance offered. My children, my own children, had tried to murder me. Are you all right, Mrs. Sampson?
I'm processing.
What would have happened if I'd drunk this wine?
You'd be dead by now.
The amount present suggests whoever prepared this wasn't taking any chances. Whoever prepared this. Not whoever bought it or whoever gave it to me, whoever prepared it. Doctor, is it possible to determine when this substance was added to the wine? Not with certainty, but ricin is water-soluble. If it had been added years ago, it would have precipitated out or been filtered during the wine's natural settling process. This was added recently, probably within the past few weeks. Within the past few weeks, around the time my children had started planning their Christmas gifts, I thanked Dr. Vance and drove home in a daze. My beautiful house, my refuge since William's death, now felt like a crime scene. Every room held memories of my children's childhoods, their first steps and lost teeth and graduation photos. How does a mother reconcile those memories with the knowledge that those same children had tried to poison her? I called Harold Morrison and arranged an emergency meeting for that afternoon. Jesus Christ, Clara, he said when I showed him the laboratory report. You need to call the police immediately. And tell them what? That I suspect my children of attempted murder based on a bottle of wine I haven't opened? With no witnesses and no direct evidence of who poisoned it. Harold studied the report again. The forensic evidence is compelling, but not legally sufficient. Any decent defense attorney would argue that someone else could have tampered with the wine before my children purchased it, or that I could have poisoned it myself to frame them. Why would you do that?
Money.
Maybe I have gambling debts or medical bills. Maybe I want to disinherit my children and need a justification that will hold up in probate court. I smiled grimly. I've been married to a lawyer for 35 years, Harold. I know how these cases work. So, what do you want to do? I've been thinking about that question all morning. I want to wait and watch. If they tried to kill me once, they'll probably try again, especially when I don't conveniently die from the wine. Next time, I'll be ready. Harold looked uncomfortable. Clara, this is incredibly dangerous. If you're right about your children, if I'm right about my children, then I need evidence that will stand up in court. Enough evidence to make sure they never try this again, with me or anyone else. And if you're wrong? I thought about Victoria's terror when I'd mentioned opening the wine. About the fact that none of the local wine shops had sold this particular vintage. About the $12 million my children stood to inherit when I died. I'm not wrong. That evening, I made 3 phone calls. The first was to Thomas. Darling, I wanted to thank you again for that beautiful wine. I'm planning to open it this weekend to celebrate the new year properly. This weekend? His voice was carefully neutral. That sounds lovely, Mother. The second call was to Patricia. I'm hosting a small New Year's Eve party, just a few close friends. And I thought I'd finally open that gorgeous Bordeaux you children gave me. Oh, a pause. Are you sure you want to open such an expensive wine for just a casual party? Life's too short to save the good wine forever. The third call was to James. I wanted you and Sarah to be the first to know. I'm opening your Christmas wine on New Year's Eve. I thought it would be a fitting way to toast the year ahead. That's great, Mom. Sarah and I are looking forward to celebrating with you. James sounded genuine, which gave me hope that perhaps not all of my children were involved in the plot against me. But it also meant that at least one of them was planning to watch me die. By Saturday morning, I had my answer. Victoria called at 9 a.m., her voice tight with barely controlled hysteria. Clara, I'm so sorry, but Thomas and I won't be able to make it to your party tonight. He's come down with something awful, Fever, vomiting, the whole thing. Probably the flu. The flu. How convenient. Oh, that's terrible. Should I postpone the party? No, no. Don't change your plans on our account. But Clara, maybe you shouldn't open that wine tonight. If Thomas is sick, it might be something contagious, and you don't want to risk your health. I'll be fine, dear. I'll just open a different bottle. Promise me you won't open the Bordeaux. Promise me. The desperation in her voice was unmistakable. She knew exactly what would happen if I drank that wine.
I promise, Elite.
That afternoon, I prepared for my New Year's Eve party, a party that would consist of me, alone, staging an elaborate performance for an audience of potential murderers. At 7 p.m., I placed the poisoned wine bottle on my dining room table, opened a bottle of harmless Pinot Noir, and poured myself a glass. Then I called Patricia. I'm about to open the Bordeaux, I announced. I wish you were here to share it with me. Mom, wait. I hung up and turned off my phone. At 8 p.m., I called James from my landline. The wine is absolutely magnificent. Your father would have loved it. I'm so glad, Mom. Save some for us to try when we visit next week. At 9 p.m., I poured the poisoned wine down my kitchen sink and called Thomas's house, letting it ring until the answering machine picked up. Thank you for the wine, I said to the machine. It was exactly what I needed. Then I went upstairs, drew a hot bath, and soaked in lavender-scented water while I waited for my children to reveal themselves. I didn't have to wait long. I need to pause Clara's story, here to share something that might save your life. If you've ever been told you're too old to start over, let me tell you, that's a lie. Your story isn't over, and you still have chapters left to write. Our best-selling book, Reclaiming Your Peace After Pain, is filled with simple, powerful steps to help you heal, rebuild, and fall in love with life again. Just like Clara, you have more wisdom than they give you credit for, more strength than they realize, and more options than they want you to know about. This book has already helped thousands of women recognize the warning signs of manipulation, set boundaries that protect them, and reclaim their power from people who underestimate them. Whether you're dealing with family betrayal, financial manipulation, or simply feeling invisible in your own life, this book will show you practical steps to take back control and write your own triumphant ending. Click the link in the description box and start your new beginning today. Don't let anyone convince you that your best years are behind you. Clara's about to prove that the most dangerous women are the ones who've been underestimated. Now, let's see what happens when her children think their plan has worked. Victoria arrived at my house at 6 a.m. on New Year's Day. I watched from my bedroom window as she parked in my circular driveway, sat in her car for several minutes, then walked slowly to my front door. She looked exhausted, her usually perfect hair disheveled, her expensive coat wrinkled as if she'd slept in it. I let her knock 3 times before I answered, making sure to appear groggy and confused. Victoria? What are you doing here so early? Clara, thank God you're all right. She pushed past me into the foyer, her eyes immediately scanning my face for signs of illness. How are you feeling?
Fine, dear.
Why wouldn't I be? You're not nauseous? No stomach problems?
No difficulty breathing.
The symptoms of ricin poisoning, listed with the precision of someone who'd researched them thoroughly. Should I be having those symptoms? Victoria's face went pale. No, of course not. With Thomas being so sick, I was worried you might have caught whatever he has. I thought Thomas had the flu.
He does. He did.
He's better now. Victoria was backing toward the door, her relief at finding me alive warring with her confusion about why I wasn't dead. I should go. Let you get back to sleep. Before you leave, would you like some coffee? I made a full pot. Coffee. Victoria looked terrified, as if I'd offered her poison. Just coffee, dear. Nothing fancy.
No,
I should get home to Thomas. After she left, I called Harold Morrison at home. They expected me to be dead, I told him. Victoria came to check on me this morning, and she was shocked to find me alive and healthy. What's your next move? I wait for them to try again. And this time, I'll be ready with cameras. That afternoon, I called a home security company and arranged for a complete surveillance system to be installed within 48 hours. Cameras in every room, motion sensors, audio recording equipment, everything I needed to document my children's next murder attempt. We don't usually get requests this comprehensive, the installer said as he positioned cameras in my kitchen. Is there a specific security concern? I'm a 70-year-old widow living alone in a large house, I replied. I think that's security concern enough. While the security system was being installed, I made another call, this time to my longtime housekeeper, Mrs. Patterson. Mrs. Sampson, I was so sorry to hear about Mr. William, she said. Is there anything I can do to help? Mrs. Patterson had worked for our family for 15 years, coming twice a week to clean and sometimes staying to prepare meals when we entertained. She was discreet, observant, and completely trustworthy. Actually, there's something, I said. I'd like you to start coming daily for the next few weeks. I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed managing everything alone. Of course. Should I continue with my usual duties? Yes, but I'd also like you to pay special attention to the kitchen. Make note of any food or drink that appears to have been tampered with. And if any family members visit while I'm out, please document exactly what they do and where they go in the house. Mrs. Patterson had worked for wealthy families long enough to recognize the signs of domestic trouble. I understand completely, Mrs. Sampson. You can count on my discretion. By Wednesday, my house was equipped with more surveillance equipment than most jewelry stores. Every entrance was monitored. Every room was covered. Every conversation was recorded. If my children made another attempt on my life, I'd have evidence that would stand up in any court. I didn't have to wait long. Thursday evening, Patricia called with an invitation I'd been expecting. Mom, I feel terrible that we missed your New Year's party. Would you like to come for dinner this weekend? I'm making your favorite lamb recipe. My favorite lamb recipe, the one that required hours of slow cooking and produced a rich, dark sauce that would easily hide the taste of poison. That sounds wonderful, dear. Saturday night. Perfect. Just family, me, James, Sarah, and little Emma. Thomas and Victoria are still recovering from their flu. Or preparing for the next phase of their plan. Saturday evening found me sitting in Patricia's trendy downtown loft, a converted warehouse space with exposed brick walls and industrial fixtures that probably cost more than most people's houses. Patricia had always favored dramatic settings, as if her life were a stage production rather than reality. Mom, you look wonderful, she said, kissing my cheek as she took my coat. I was worried you might still be feeling the effects of New Year's Eve. What effects would those be, dear? Well, you know how wine can affect people our age. Sometimes it takes days to fully recover from a good celebration. Our age. Patricia was 39 years old, but she was already categorizing me as elderly and fragile. James and Sarah were in the living room, playing with Emma on a blanket spread across the polished concrete floor. They looked up as I entered, and I caught something in James's expression, concern, perhaps, or guilt. Mom, how are you feeling? He asked, studying my face intently. Perfect, darling. Why does everyone keep asking me that? No reason. You just seemed a little tired when I talked to you on New Year's Eve. New Year's Eve, when I'd supposedly drunk the poisoned wine and should now be dead. Patricia bustled around her open-concept kitchen, putting final touches on dinner. The lamb smelled wonderful, rich and savory with herbs from what she claimed was her rooftop garden. She'd always been a good cook, inheriting my love of feeding people but adding her own modern flair to traditional recipes. Wine, Mom? She asked, holding up a bottle of red that I didn't recognize. Just a small glass, dear. Patricia poured wine for everyone except herself, claiming she was trying to cut back for her New Year's resolution. I noticed she was particularly careful with my glass, handling it separately from the others. "A toast," James said, raising his glass. "To family and to Mom's continued good health." Continued good health. The phrase hung in the air like a prayer or a threat. We ate dinner at Patricia's glass dining table, making conversation about Emma's development, James's work, Sarah's plans to return to nursing school. Normal family topics, but underneath the pleasant chatter, I sensed undercurrents of tension and expectation. Patricia kept glancing at me throughout the meal, watching for signs that I was becoming ill. She'd prepared a beautiful dessert, chocolate mousse with raspberry sauce, but seemed distracted when serving it. "This is delicious, Patricia," I said, savoring the rich chocolate. "You've really outdone yourself." "Thank you, Mom. I hope you enjoy every bite." There was something odd about the way she said it, but the mousse tasted perfectly normal. Sweet, creamy, with just a hint of liqueur that I couldn't identify. We finished dinner around 9 p.m., and I made my excuses to leave early, claiming fatigue. "Are you sure you're all right to drive?" James asked, walking me to the door. "You seem a little unsteady."
Did I?
I felt perfectly fine, but James was looking at me with a kind of concern usually reserved for people showing obvious signs of distress.
I'm fine, darling.
"Just tired. Maybe you should stay here tonight. Patricia has a guest room." "Absolutely not. I sleep much better in my own bed." I drove home carefully, hyper-aware of every sensation in my body. Was I imagining the slight dizziness, or was something actually affecting my coordination? By the time I reached my house, I was convinced that Patricia had indeed poisoned something I'd consumed. But I'd been prepared for this possibility. Before leaving for dinner, I'd taken a precaution that my children couldn't have anticipated. I'd swallowed a small dose of Ipecac, a medication that induces vomiting within minutes of consuming anything dangerous. As I walked through my front door, the Ipecac began to take effect. I barely made it to my bathroom before my body expelled everything I'd eaten at Patricia's dinner. The lamb, the wine, the chocolate mousse, all of it came up in violent waves that left me shaking and empty, but alive. I rinsed my mouth and checked my hidden cameras to make sure they'd recorded my return home and my subsequent illness. Tomorrow, I'd have samples of my vomit tested to see what Patricia had tried to poison me with. But tonight, I had a different priority. I called Patricia's landline from my bedroom phone, letting it ring until her voicemail picked up. "Patricia, it's Mom. I wanted to thank you for the lovely dinner. I'm home safe, and I'm feeling exactly as you probably expected me to feel. Sleep well, dear." Then I went to bed and waited for morning, when my children would discover that their second attempt at murder had also failed. Some lessons take more than one try to learn, but some teachers have infinite patience. The laboratory results confirmed what I already knew. Patricia had laced my chocolate mousse with enough cyanide to kill a horse. "Mrs. Sampson, this is the second positive result for lethal poisoning I've given you in 2 weeks," Dr. Vance said, reviewing the test results in her sterile laboratory. "Have you considered that someone is actively trying to murder you?" The thought had occurred to me. These aren't amateur attempts. Both ricin and cyanide require specific knowledge to obtain and prepare safely. Whoever is doing this has researched methods, dosages, and delivery systems. How much cyanide was in the dessert sample? Enough to cause death within 6 hours. The chocolate and raspberry flavoring would have masked the bitter almond taste until it was too late. I sat in Dr. Vance's office, surrounded by scientific equipment that could detect molecular-level poisons, and marveled at the efficiency of my children's murder attempts. They'd chosen substances that would mimic natural causes of death: heart failure, stroke, sudden illness. If I hadn't been suspicious enough to have the evidence tested, everyone would have assumed I'd died of old age or natural causes. Doctor, I need you to preserve these samples and document everything you found. I may need this evidence in court. Are you planning to press criminal charges? I'm planning to end this before they try a third time. That afternoon, I met with Harold Morrison to review my options. You have enough evidence for attempted murder charges against both Victoria and Patricia, he said, studying the laboratory reports. The police would have to take this seriously. And then what happens? They get arrested, post bail, and disappear to avoid trial? Or worse, they accelerate their timeline and try to kill me before the case goes to court. Harold looked troubled. Clara, what you're suggesting sounds like vigilante justice. I'm suggesting self-defense. My children have tried to murder me twice in 2 weeks. I'm 70 years old, living alone, with no one to protect me except myself. What exactly do you have in mind? I'd been thinking about this question ever since Dr. Vance confirmed the cyanide results. My children saw me as weak, elderly, an easy target who wouldn't fight back. They'd been so confident in their abilities as killers that they'd made crucial mistakes. Now it was time to turn their confidence against them. I want to set a trap, I said. Something that will force them to reveal themselves completely, with witnesses present and cameras recording everything. What kind of trap? A family dinner. Here at my house. All 3 children, their spouses, little Emma. I'll serve wine, the same wine they gave me for Christmas. Harold's eyes widened. Clara, that wine contains enough ricin to kill everyone at the table. Not if I substitute bottles. I'll serve harmless wine from identical bottles, but my children won't know about the substitution. When Victoria and Patricia react with panic, when they try to stop people from drinking, when they reveal their knowledge of the poison. You'll have your confession. I'll have everything I need to destroy them. We spent the next hour planning the logistics. I would host a belated Christmas celebration the following Saturday, claiming I wanted to make up for the holidays that had been disrupted by various illnesses. I'd serve the Chateau Margaux prominently, making a ceremony of opening the special wine my children had given me. Meanwhile, Harold would arrange for discreet witnesses to be present, a court reporter hidden in my study, a detective stationed in my kitchen, cameras recording every word and gesture. If this works, Harold warned, your family will be destroyed forever. There won't be any going back. I thought about the ricin-laced wine bottle, about the cyanide poison mousse, about the cold calculation required to plan your mother's murder. My family was destroyed the moment they decided to kill me for money, I replied. I'm just making sure everyone else knows it too. That evening, I made the phone calls that would set my trap in motion. Thomas, darling, I'm hosting a special dinner this Saturday to make up for our interrupted holidays. And I've decided to finally open that beautiful wine you gave me for Christmas. The Bordeaux? His voice was carefully controlled. Are you certain you want to open something so valuable? Life's too short to save the good wine forever. Will you and Victoria be able to join us? A pause. We'll be there. The second call went to Patricia. I'm planning a family celebration this Saturday, and I want to make it special by opening the Chateau Margaux. It seems appropriate to share something so precious with the people who gave it to me. Mom, are you sure? That wine is really expensive. Which is exactly why we should enjoy it together. Family is more important than money, don't you think? The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know about Patricia's priorities. The third call was to James. I'm hosting a dinner party this Saturday, and I'd love for you, Sarah, and Emma to be there. I'm opening the wine you all gave me for Christmas. That sounds wonderful, Mom. We'll be there. James still sounded genuine, which continued to give me hope that at least one of my children wasn't actively trying to murder me. But it also meant that at least one innocent person would be present when I revealed the others as killers. By Friday evening, everything was in place. Harold had arranged for Detective Lieutenant Maria Santos to be present, disguised as a caterer hired for the evening. A court reporter named Janet Mills would be hidden in my study with a direct audio feed from the dining room. High-definition cameras would record every word, every expression, every moment of panic when my children realized their murder weapon was about to be consumed by the entire family. I spent Friday night in my study, writing what might be my final letter to each of my children. If something went wrong, if they realized what I was planning and turned violent, I wanted them to understand exactly why I'd chosen this path. To my children, by the time you read this, you'll know that I discovered your attempts to murder me. The ricin-laced wine, the cyanide-poisoned dessert, the careful planning required to kill your own mother for her inheritance. I want you to understand that I'm not angry, I'm heartbroken. The children I raised, the people I loved more than my own life, decided that my money was worth more than my existence. You calculated that $12 million was sufficient compensation for becoming motherless. You were wrong about the money. My actual estate is worth considerably more than you realized, hidden in trusts and accounts you never knew existed. But more importantly, you were wrong about me. You thought I was weak, elderly, an easy victim who wouldn't fight back. You forgot that I survived the Depression as a child, built a successful business with your father, and raised 3 children while managing a household and a career. You forgot that weak people don't accumulate $12 million by accident. Your attempts on my life have failed because I'm not the helpless old woman you imagined me to be. I'm Clara Sampson, and Clara Sampson doesn't die easily. What happens next is entirely up to you. You can confess your crimes, accept the consequences, and perhaps salvage some shred of dignity from this disaster. Or you can continue lying, continue scheming, and discover exactly how ruthless your elderly mother can be when her life is threatened.
Choose wisely.
You won't get another chance.
Clara.
I sealed the letters and placed them in my safe, next to my revised will and the laboratory reports documenting my children's poison attempts. Whatever happened tomorrow, there would be evidence of everything they'd done and everything I discovered. Saturday morning, I woke early and prepared for what would either be a triumph of justice or my final meal. I dressed carefully in my best black dress, the one William had always said made me look like a queen. I arranged my hair in the elegant chignon I'd worn to every important event of our marriage. I clasped my pearl necklace around my throat, the necklace William had given me on our wedding day, the one that had become my armor against a world that saw elderly women as invisible. Today, I would be anything but invisible. Today, my children would learn that some mothers love their children enough to save them from themselves, even if it means destroying the family forever. Today, the poison would finally claim its intended victim. Not me, but the illusion that we were a loving family instead of a nest of vipers. Some gifts are meant to kill. Some gifts succeed, just not in the way their givers intended. The dining room had never looked more beautiful. I'd set the table with our finest china, the Wedgwood service that had been William's grandmother's, cream-colored porcelain with hand-painted roses that caught the light from the crystal chandelier. Sterling silver flatware gleamed against the Irish linen tablecloth, and fresh flowers from my greenhouse created centerpieces that filled the air with the scent of winter jasmine. At the head of the table, positioned like a guest of honor, sat the bottle of 1982 Chateau Margaux that my children had given me for Christmas. The same bottle that contained enough ricin to kill everyone in the room. Except it didn't. The night before, I'd carefully removed the poisoned wine using a surgical syringe, replacing it with an identical vintage from William's collection. The ricin-laced Bordeaux now sat safely in Harold Morrison's office safe, awaiting its role as evidence in the criminal trials that would surely follow tonight's revelations. Detective Lieutenant Maria Santos moved efficiently through my kitchen, arranging hors d'oeuvres on silver platters while maintaining the perfect disguise of a professional caterer. She was younger than I'd expected, perhaps 40, with the kind of observant eyes that missed nothing. "Mrs. Sampson, the recording equipment is functioning perfectly," she said quietly as she garnished canapes with precision. We'll capture every word spoken in the dining room. And the court reporter? Ms. Mills is positioned in your study with a clear audio feed. Everything will be documented for legal proceedings. At 6 p.m. sharp, Thomas and Victoria arrived. They looked nervous. Victoria's usual perfect composure cracked around the edges. She kept glancing at the wine bottle on the dining room table as if it were a loaded gun. "Mother, you look lovely," Thomas said, kissing my cheek with lips that felt cold against my skin. "This is quite an elaborate setup for a simple family dinner." "Nothing's too elaborate for the people I love most," I replied, watching his face for any sign of guilt or recognition. Victoria had gone directly to the dining room and was staring at the wine bottle with barely concealed horror. "Clara, are you certain you want to open this wine tonight? It's so valuable. Perhaps we should save it for a more appropriate occasion." What occasion could be more appropriate than celebrating family? Well, I just think maybe a smaller bottle would be better. Something less expensive. Patricia and James arrived together, having shared a ride from the city. Patricia immediately noticed the prominent display of the Chateau Margaux and went pale. "Mom, wow, you're really going all out tonight." I wanted to make this evening special. After all the disruptions over the holidays, I thought we needed a proper celebration. James hugged me warmly, and for a moment I felt a pang of doubt about my plan. If James was innocent, tonight would shatter his world along with my other children's lives. But if I was wrong about his innocence, tonight might be my last chance to expose the truth before they succeeded in killing me. Sarah arrived with little Emma, who toddled around my house with the fearless curiosity of a 2-year-old. Watching her explore the rooms where her aunts and father had grown up, I felt a deep sadness for the innocence that would be lost tonight. "Mom, everything looks beautiful," Sarah said, admiring the table setting. "Are we celebrating something special?" "We're celebrating survival," I said, noting how Victoria and Patricia both flinched at the word. We began with cocktails in the living room, making small talk about Emma's latest vocabulary explosion and James's recent promotion. But I could feel the tension radiating from Victoria and Patricia like heat from a radiator. They kept exchanging glances, having some kind of silent conversation about what to do. "Shall we move to the dining room?" I announced at 7:30. "I'm eager to taste that wonderful wine you gave me." Victoria actually gasped. "Clara, maybe we should eat first. Wine is better with food." "We'll have wine with dinner, dear. But I want to open this special bottle now. Let it breathe properly." I walked to the sideboard where I'd placed a silver wine opener, an antique piece that William and I had bought in France on our honeymoon. Victoria and Patricia watched my every movement like condemned prisoners watching their executioner. "This is such a beautiful bottle," I said, lifting it reverently. 1982 was an exceptional year for Bordeaux, wasn't it? "Mom, wait," Patricia interrupted. "I just remembered. I brought a different bottle that might be better for tonight. Something more accessible." She reached into her purse and pulled out a bottle of ordinary Cabernet Sauvignon, probably worth $30 compared to the $3,000 value of the Chateau Margaux. "How thoughtful, dear. But I'm particularly looking forward to this one. After all, it was your Christmas gift to me." I began working the corkscrew into the bottle, and Victoria made a sound that was almost a whimper. "Clara, please, you don't understand." "What don't I understand, Victoria?" "The wine, there might be something wrong with it." The room fell silent except for the soft scraping of the corkscrew against the cork. Everyone was staring at Victoria, who looked like she was about to faint. "What could be wrong with it?" I asked innocently. "It might have spoiled. Old wine sometimes spoils." "This wine has been properly stored for 40 years. It shouldn't be spoiled." I continued working on the cork. "Unless something happened to it more recently." Thomas stepped forward. Mother, if Victoria thinks there might be a problem with the wine, perhaps we should err on the side of caution. What kind of problem, Thomas? He looked at his wife, then at Patricia, then back at me. Just a problem. Sometimes expensive wines aren't what they seem to be. The cork came free with a soft pop that sounded like a gunshot in the tense silence. There, I said, setting the bottle on the table. Now it can breathe while we have dinner. Victoria was gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles were white. Patricia looked like she was going to be sick. Even Thomas had lost his usual composure. Only James seemed relaxed, though he was watching his siblings with growing concern. Is everything all right? He asked. You all look like you've seen a ghost. Everything's perfect, I said, beginning to pour wine into the glasses I'd arranged around the bottle. Victoria, you seem upset. Are you feeling ill? I'm fine, she whispered. I poured wine into 6 glasses, one for each adult present. The rich burgundy liquid caught the chandelier light, looking innocent and inviting. A toast, I announced, lifting my glass. To family, to love, to the bonds that tie us together, no matter what. James raised his glass with a smile. Sarah followed suit, looking puzzled by the strange atmosphere, but willing to participate. Thomas, Victoria, and Patricia sat frozen, staring at their wine glasses like they contained liquid death, which, as far as they knew, they did. Come now, I encouraged. Don't be shy. This is a moment to savor. James took a sip of his wine and smiled. This is incredible, Mom. Really exceptional. Sarah tasted hers as well. It's beautiful. So smooth. I sipped my own wine, savoring both the excellent vintage and the growing panic on my other children's faces. Victoria, you haven't touched your wine, I observed. Neither have you, Patricia. Or Thomas. Don't you like it? I'm not drinking tonight, Victoria stammered. Neither am I, Patricia added quickly. How unfortunate. This wine is really extraordinary. I took another sip, watching them carefully. Although I have to say, it tastes different than I expected. There's an unusual aftertaste. Almost bitter. Victoria made a choking sound. Bitter how? James asked, swirling his wine and inhaling the bouquet. I can't quite place it. Patricia, you've always had such a sophisticated palate. What do you think? Patricia was backing away from the table. Mom, I think we should probably. Should probably what, dear? Should probably not drink any more of that wine. The words exploded from her like a dam bursting, raw terror overriding her attempts at deception. James set down his glass and stared at his sister. Patricia, what are you talking about? The wine, she whispered. There's something wrong with the wine. What's wrong with it? I asked gently. It's poisoned, I suggested. The word hung in the air like smoke from an extinguished candle. Victoria buried her face in her hands. Thomas closed his eyes as if he could make the moment disappear. How did you know? Patricia asked, her voice barely audible. James looked around the table in confusion.
Know what?
What are you all talking about? I set down my wine glass and looked at each of my children in turn, the ones who had tried to kill me, and the one who was learning the truth for the first time. I know because I had the wine tested, I said calmly. 2 weeks ago, after Victoria's panic attack, when I mentioned opening it. I discovered it contains enough ricin to kill everyone at this table. Sarah gasped and pushed back from the table. James went rigid, his face cycling through disbelief, horror, and rage. You poisoned the wine, he said, staring at Thomas, Victoria, and Patricia. You tried to kill our mother? We can explain, Thomas began. Explain what? James's voice was rising. Explain attempted murder? Explain why you tried to poison our own mother. It wasn't supposed to happen like this, Victoria said, tears streaming down her face. She was supposed to drink it alone on New Year's Eve. It was supposed to look like natural causes. Natural causes? Sarah was holding Emma protectively, as if her daughter might be in danger from her own relatives. You tried to murder a 70-year-old woman and make it look like she died of old age. I sat quietly, letting my children confront each other with the truth I'd already discovered. The wine glasses sat untouched on the table between us. Harmless now, but symbolic of the poison that had infected my family long before anyone had tampered with Bordeaux. Why? James asked, his voice broken. Why would you do this? Patricia looked at me with something that might have been remorse or might have been calculation. Because she was never going to die, she said. She's 70 years old and healthy as a horse. She could live another 20 years, maybe more. And we need our inheritance now. Need it for what? For our lives. For our futures. For our children's futures. Thomas finally spoke, his lawyer's voice trying to regain control of the situation. James, you don't understand the financial pressures we're under. Victoria and I have substantial debts. Patricia's business is failing. We all have obligations that can't wait. So you decided to murder our mother? We decided to accelerate the timeline, Thomas said carefully. I'd heard enough. Detective Santos, I called toward the kitchen. I believe you have what you need. Lieutenant Santos emerged from the kitchen, her caterer's apron replaced by a badge and service weapon. Thomas Sampson, Victoria Sampson, Patricia Sampson, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder and attempted murder in the first degree. The next few minutes were chaos. Miranda rights being read, handcuffs being applied, my 3 children being led away, while James sat in shock and Sarah tried to comfort a crying Emma. But through it all, I remained calm, seated at the head of my dining room table, wearing my pearls and my best black dress like armor against the disintegration of my family. I had survived their attempts to kill me. I had exposed their crimes with witnesses and evidence. I had protected James and Sarah and Emma from becoming victims of the same greed that had already claimed Thomas, Victoria, and Patricia. Some victories taste bitter, even when they're absolutely necessary. Some families are worth saving, even if it means destroying them first. The house felt different after my children were arrested. Not empty. I'd been living alone since William's death, but somehow lighter, as if a poisonous presence had been removed from the air itself. I walked through rooms where Thomas, Victoria, and Patricia had planned my murder and felt only relief that their schemes had been exposed. The media attention was immediate and intense. Connecticut's socialites' children arrested for attempted poisoning. Inheritance murder plot exposed by hidden cameras. Wine gift from hell. How a 70-year-old widow outsmarted her would-be killers. The headlines made me sound like either a brilliant detective or a tragic victim, depending on the publication's angle. The truth, as usual, was more complex than either portrayal. Harold Morrison arrived at my house the morning after the arrests, carrying a briefcase full of legal documents and wearing the grim expression of a man who'd seen too much family destruction in his career. "Clara, the district attorney wants to discuss the charges with you," he said, settling into William's favorite chair in the study. "They're considering adding conspiracy to commit murder for financial gain, which carries a potential life sentence."
Good.
Harold looked surprised by my matter-of-fact response. "This is your family we're talking about. Your children. Are you certain you want to pursue the maximum possible charges?" "Harold, they tried to kill me twice. If I hadn't been suspicious enough to have the evidence tested, I'd be dead right now. They'd be mourning my tragic passing while secretly celebrating their windfall inheritance. The defense attorneys will argue that no actual harm was done, that this should be treated as attempted murder rather than a capital crime. No harm was done because I prevented it. That doesn't make their intentions any less murderous." Harold pulled out a folder containing preliminary police reports. The investigation has uncovered some interesting details about how they obtained the poison. Thomas has connections in the pharmaceutical industry through his law practice. Victoria researched ricin extraction methods online for months. Patricia purchased castor beans through a gardening supply company. So, this wasn't a spontaneous decision. Far from it. They've been planning your murder since at least last summer, probably longer. Last summer, when I'd been grieving William's death and depending on my children for emotional support. While I'd been vulnerable and trusting, they'd been researching ways to kill me. What about James? I asked. The investigation must have determined his level of involvement. James appears to be completely innocent. His phone records, financial documents, and internet search history show no connection to the murder plot. If anything, he seems to have been deliberately excluded from his siblings' planning. That was some consolation, at least. One of my children had retained enough humanity to refuse to participate in matricide. There's something else, Harold continued. The investigators found evidence that this wasn't their first attempt at insurance fraud. Victoria filed a suspicious claim for jewelry theft last year that was later withdrawn. Patricia's business received several large payments from shell corporations that appear to have been funded by Thomas's client accounts. They've been stealing for longer than just planning to kill me. It appears so. Your murder would have been the culmination of years of financial crimes, not an isolated incident. That evening, James came to see me. He looked older than his 36 years, as if the revelations of the past week had aged him decades. Mom, I don't know what to say. I had no idea what they were planning. I know, darling. I never suspected you were involved. How did you know? How did you figure it out when I completely missed the signs? I poured us both brandy from the crystal decanter William had cherished, the same brandy I'd been drinking the night I first became suspicious of the Christmas wine. I knew because I've lived 70 years, James. I've learned to recognize when people see me as an obstacle rather than a person. Your siblings stopped looking at me as their mother months ago. To them, I became nothing more than a barrier between them and $12 million. $12 million. James shook his head. I knew you and Dad were comfortable, but I didn't realize the estate was worth that much. Actually, it's worth considerably more than that. Your siblings made their calculations based on incomplete information. James looked at me sharply. What do you mean? I walked to the safe hidden behind William's portrait and removed several documents I'd never shown to any of my children. The Hawaii properties alone are worth $4 million. The investment accounts your siblings knew about represent only half of our actual portfolio. There are business interests, art collections, jewelry, and other assets they never discovered. How much? Approximately $30 million, depending on current market valuations. James set down his brandy glass and stared at me. 30 million? Mom, that's more than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. It's more than anyone needs, which is exactly why I've decided to restructure my entire estate plan. I handed him a document Harold had prepared that morning, a newel that would reshape my family's future in ways my arrested children couldn't have imagined. James, I'm leaving everything to you. What? The house, the properties, the investments, all of it. Thomas, Victoria, and Patricia forfeited their inheritance the moment they tried to murder me. Mom, I can't accept that. It's too much. They're still your children, despite what they've done. Are they? Children don't plot their parents' deaths for financial gain. Children don't research poison methods or calculate inheritance timelines while their mother is grieving her husband's death. James was quiet for a long moment, staring at the legal document that would make him one of the wealthiest men in Connecticut. What about their children? Emma, and any future grandchildren? This punishes them for their parents' crimes. I've established trust funds for any grandchildren, including Emma. They'll be well provided for, but they won't inherit wealth their parents tried to murder for. And Sarah? Sarah will receive a substantial inheritance as well. She's proven herself to be a loving daughter-in-law and a devoted mother. She deserves security. James set the document on the table between us, his expression troubled. Mom, this feels like I'm profiting from my siblings' crimes. You're inheriting wealth that would have been stolen by murderers. There's a difference. Is there? They're still my brother and sister. Whatever they've done, they're still family. I looked at this son, who had somehow retained his moral compass while his siblings had lost theirs completely, and felt a mixture of pride and sadness. James, family is more than shared DNA. Family is love, loyalty, protection, support. Your siblings abandoned those values when they decided I was worth more dead than alive. But if you disinherit them completely, if they go to prison for decades, their lives are essentially over. Their lives ended when they became murderers. I'm simply making the consequences official. James stood up and walked to the window overlooking the garden where he'd played as a child, where all my children had learned to walk and ride bicycles and climb trees. What kind of mother disinherits her own children? The question hit like a physical blow, but I'd been expecting it. The kind of mother who refuses to reward attempted murder with financial inheritance. The kind of mother who protects innocent grandchildren from parents who see family members as sources of income rather than people worthy of love. They'll appeal the will. They'll claim you're not competent to make these decisions. Let them try. I've documented everything. Their poison attempts, the evidence, their confessions. Any court will recognize that disinheriting people who tried to kill you is a rational decision. James turned back to me, his eyes filled with pain. Mom, if you do this, you're destroying our family forever. Our family was destroyed the moment your siblings decided to poison me for money. I'm simply acknowledging reality. He picked up the will and studied it again, then set it down with resignation. If this is what you want, I'll support your decision. But I want you to know that I'll use this inheritance to take care of Emma and any other grandchildren, regardless of what their parents have done. I would expect nothing less from you. After James left, I sat alone in my study, surrounded by the documents that would reshape my family's future. $30 million, accumulated over 40 years of careful planning and wise investment, now concentrated in the hands of the one child who had never asked for anything. Outside, snow was beginning to fall again, dusting the garden where my children had once played together in apparent innocence. It was hard to reconcile those memories with the reality of what they'd become, harder still to accept that love, no matter how deep or enduring, wasn't always enough to prevent people from becoming monsters. But some decisions are about justice rather than love. Some inheritances have to be earned rather than assumed. Some mothers have to choose between enabling evil and preventing it, even when the choice destroys everything they once held dear. I'd made my choice. Now I would live with the consequences, just as my children would live with theirs. The trial began 6 months later, in the spring when Connecticut emerged from its winter cocoon into brilliant green renewal. I watched the courthouse steps fill with reporters and cameras as I walked through the media gauntlet, my head held high, my pearl necklace catching the morning sunlight like armor. The state had charged Thomas, Victoria, and Patricia with conspiracy to commit murder in the first degree, attempted murder, and financial elder abuse. Their defense attorneys, expensive lawyers paid for with money from assets I'd helped them accumulate over the years, argued that their clients had never intended actual harm, that this was a case of poor judgment rather than premeditated murder. Poor judgment. As if researching poison methods and calculating inheritance timelines was equivalent to forgetting to return a library book. I testified on the second day of the trial, taking the witness stand in the same courthouse where William had practiced law for 30 years. The prosecutor, a sharp young woman named Amanda Chen, led me through the timeline of events with clinical precision. Mrs. Sampson, when you first received the wine bottle as a Christmas gift, Did you suspect it might be dangerous? Not initially. I was grateful that my children had given me something so thoughtful and expensive. What changed your mind? My daughter-in-law's reaction when I mentioned opening it. She became hysterical, begging me to wait, offering increasingly desperate excuses for why I shouldn't drink the wine. Did this seem like normal concern for preserving an expensive gift?
No.
It seemed like terror that someone might consume something she knew was lethal. The defense attorneys tried to portray me as a paranoid elderly woman who had misinterpreted her children's genuine concern for her well-being. Thomas's lawyer, a silver-haired man who specialized in white-collar crime, suggested that I might have poisoned the wine myself to frame my children for insurance money. Mrs. Sampson, isn't it true that your late husband left significant debts that you've been struggling to pay? My husband left no debts. Our estate is worth approximately $30 million. $30 million that your children knew nothing about? They knew about some of our assets. They made their calculations based on incomplete information. So, you deliberately concealed wealth from your own children? I looked at this man who was being paid handsomely to help murderers escape consequences and felt nothing but contempt. I maintained financial privacy, which is my right as the person who earned that money. My children's ignorance of our complete financial situation doesn't justify attempted murder. Victoria's testimony was a masterpiece of self-serving manipulation. She claimed the poison had been Thomas's idea, that she'd only participated because she feared for her own safety if she refused. She cried beautifully for the jury, playing the role of the manipulated wife who'd been coerced into crime by her controlling husband. I never wanted to hurt Clara, she sobbed. I love her like my own mother. But Thomas said we were all in terrible debt, that this was the only way to save our family from financial ruin. Patricia took a different approach, arguing that the whole thing had been a prank gone wrong. She claimed they'd never intended for me to actually drink the poison wine, that they'd planned to reveal the joke before any harm was done. We thought it would be funny to see Mom's reaction when she found out we'd given her fake wine, she said, her voice steady and convincing. It was supposed to be a harmless family prank. A harmless family prank involving lethal doses of ricin and cyanide. Thomas, true to his legal training, remained silent throughout most of the trial, letting his attorney argue that the prosecution had failed to prove intent to actually kill. The poison, he claimed, was never meant to be consumed. His clients were guilty of poor judgment, perhaps, but not attempted murder. The prosecution's response was devastating in its simplicity. Amanda Chin played the audio recordings from the dinner party where my children had revealed their knowledge of the poisoned wine. She showed photographs of the ricin-laced bottle, the cyanide-tainted dessert, the months of internet searches about poison methods. Most damning of all, she presented financial documents proving that my children had been planning to liquidate my assets immediately after my death, with contracts and bank accounts already prepared for the inheritance they expected to receive. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, she said in her closing argument, the defendants want you to believe this was all a misunderstanding, a prank gone wrong, a moment of poor judgment. But premeditated murder isn't a moment, it's a process. And this process took months. She walked them through the timeline. The research into poison methods, the purchase of materials, the careful preparation of the wine bottle, the elaborate Christmas presentation designed to make me feel grateful for receiving my own death sentence. This wasn't poor judgment. This was sophisticated, calculated, cold-blooded attempted murder for financial gain. The only reason Clara Sampson is alive today is because she was smart enough to recognize the danger and brave enough to expose it. The jury deliberated for 8 hours. When they returned, their faces were grim. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder in the first degree, how do you find? Guilty. On the charge of attempted murder in the first degree, how do you find? Guilty. On the charges of financial elder abuse, how do you find?
Guilty.
Thomas was sentenced to 25 years in prison. Victoria received 20 years. Patricia, who had planned the cyanide poisoning independently, got 22 years. They would all be elderly when they were released, if they were released. Appeals would take years. Parole would be unlikely for violent offenders, and their advanced ages would make them poor candidates for early release. In effect, I had sentenced my own children to die in prison. After the sentencing, I stood on the courthouse steps facing a battery of microphones and cameras. Reporters shouted questions about how it felt to testify against my own children, whether I felt guilty about their prison sentences, what message I wanted to send to other families facing similar betrayals. I want people to understand that family loyalty doesn't require accepting victimization, I said, my voice steady despite the chaos around me. Love doesn't mean allowing people to harm you without consequences. And being elderly doesn't mean being helpless. Do you forgive your children for what they did? One reporter called out. I thought about the question, about forgiveness and justice, and the difference between enabling and loving. I forgive them for being weak enough to choose money over family, I said finally. I don't forgive them for trying to murder me. Some actions are unforgivable, regardless of who commits them. That evening, I hosted a quiet dinner for James, Sarah, and Emma. We ate in the same dining room where the poison wine had been displayed, but the atmosphere was peaceful rather than poisonous. Mom, are you all right? James asked as we finished dessert. Today must have been incredibly difficult. Today was necessary, I replied. Difficult, but necessary. Do you ever wonder if there was another way? Some solution that wouldn't have destroyed the family completely. I looked at my granddaughter, who was playing with her food and babbling happily, oblivious to the adult conversation around her. Emma would grow up knowing that her aunts and uncle were in prison for trying to murder their mother. That knowledge would shape her understanding of family, loyalty, and the consequences of greed. James, there was another way. Your siblings could have chosen love over money, patience over greed, family loyalty over personal gain. They made their choice. I made mine. And now we move forward. Emma will grow up understanding that actions have consequences, that family bonds are sacred but not unconditional, and that some choices can't be undone. After they left, I walked through my house, the house that had been a crime scene, a fortress, and now, finally, a home again. In every room, I could feel the absence of the poison that had infected our family for so many months. Tomorrow, I would begin the process of rebuilding a life without 3 of my children. It would be lonely sometimes, but it would be authentic in a way our family hadn't been since William's death. Some tables are cleared by washing dishes. Some tables are cleared by removing the poison from the room entirely. I'd chosen the latter, and I was finally at peace with that choice. 2 years passed before I saw any of my imprisoned children again. The visit took place at the Connecticut Correctional Institution for Women, where Patricia was serving her 22-year sentence in a facility that looked more like a college campus than a prison. I drove there on a crisp October morning, the trees blazing with autumn colors that reminded me of happier family gatherings in years past. Patricia had requested the visit through her lawyer, claiming she had important information about additional crimes that had never been prosecuted. The authorities encouraged me to meet with her, hoping she might provide evidence about other financial frauds she, Thomas, and Victoria had committed. I wasn't sure why I'd agreed to come. Perhaps curiosity. Perhaps some lingering maternal instinct that hoped she'd found genuine remorse during her incarceration. Perhaps I simply wanted to see what 2 years of consequences had done to someone who'd once thought murder was an acceptable solution to financial problems. The prison visiting room was surprisingly pleasant, bright, clean, with windows that looked out over landscaped grounds. Patricia was already seated at a small table when I arrived, wearing the standard prison uniform but looking healthier than I'd expected. Prison, it seemed, agreed with her. "Hello, Mom," she said as I sat across from her. The guard station nearby was close enough to intervene if necessary, but far enough to allow private conversation. Patricia, you look good. Younger somehow. Has retirement been treating you well? Retirement. As if my withdrawal from social activities after her imprisonment had been a lifestyle choice rather than a necessity. I'm managing. You wanted to see me about additional crimes? Patricia smiled, and for a moment she looked like the little girl who used to climb into my lap for bedtime stories. Actually, I lied about that. I wanted to see you, for personal reasons. Which are? I wanted to apologize. Not the kind of apology the lawyers coach you to give at sentencing, but a real one. From daughter to mother. I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation or genuine remorse. After 40 years of motherhood and 70 years of life experience, I'd learned to recognize the difference. Go on. Mom, what we did to you was unforgivable. Not just the poison, the whole thing. The way we treated you after Dad died, the way we saw you as an obstacle instead of a person, the way we planned your death like it was a business transaction. Her voice was steady, her eyes clear. If this was manipulation, it was more sophisticated than anything she'd attempted before her imprisonment. Why now, Patricia? Why this apology after 2 years? Because I've had 2 years to think about what kind of person I became. 2 years to realize that we didn't just try to kill you, we killed our family. We destroyed everything you and Dad built, everything that made us who we used to be. I waited for her to continue. I know you can't forgive me. I know I can't undo what we did. But I wanted you to know that I understand now what we lost. It wasn't just your money we were after, it was our souls. And we traded them for something that was never really ours to begin with. It was a good apology. Thoughtful, specific, acknowledging both the crime and its consequences. But I'd heard Patricia give convincing performances before. What do you want from me? I asked. Nothing. That's the point. For the first time since Dad died, maybe for the first time in my adult life, I'm not asking you for anything. I just wanted you to know that your daughter, the real daughter you raised, not the monster she became, is still in here somewhere. We sat in silence for several minutes. Outside the windows, other inmates walked across the grounds with family members who'd come to visit. Some conversations looked heated, others tearful, others businesslike. All of them carried the weight of choices that couldn't be undone. How are Thomas and Victoria? I asked finally. Patricia's expression darkened. Thomas is struggling. Men's prison is different than this place. He's had some problems with other inmates, especially when they found out he tried to poison his elderly mother. And Victoria? Victoria blames you. She thinks you overreacted, that we never would have actually let you drink the wine. She's convinced herself that this was all your fault for not trusting us. Do you believe that? Patricia looked me directly in the eyes. Mom, I spent months researching how to kill you with cyanide. I practiced making poison desserts until I got the dosage right. I calculated exactly how long it would take you to die and what symptoms you'd experience. Her voice was steady, but filled with self-loathing. There's no overreaction to attempted murder. There's only justice. I felt something shift inside my chest. Not forgiveness, exactly, but a lessening of the anger I'd carried for 2 years. What will you do when you're released? Patricia laughed bitterly. I'll be 61 years old when I get out if I live that long. No job prospects, no family connections, a felony murder conviction on my record. I'll probably work in a convenience store until I die. That's not necessarily true. Mom, no one hires elderly ex-convicts who tried to poison their own mothers. I reached into my purse and pulled out an envelope I'd prepared before driving to the prison. What's this? A cashier's check for $50,000. Enough to get you started when you're released if you choose to use it constructively. Patricia stared at the envelope like it might contain another poison. I don't understand. Why would you give me money after what I did to you? Because you're still my daughter. Because prison has been your punishment, not poverty for the rest of your life. Because I'd rather you rebuild yourself into someone worth being than spend 20 years planning revenge against me. I don't deserve this. No, you don't. But mercy isn't about what people deserve. It's about who you choose to be when you have the power to help or harm someone who's wronged you. Patricia opened the envelope with shaking hands, stared at the check, then set it carefully on the table between us. There are conditions, I continued. You never contact James, Sarah, or Emma. You never discuss our family with the media. You use this money to build a legitimate life, not to fund more schemes or revenge fantasies. And if I violate those conditions, then you'll discover that I can be just as thorough in destroying people as I was in saving myself from you. We talked for another hour about inconsequential things: her prison job in the library, the classes she was taking, the books she'd been reading. Normal mother-daughter conversation if you ignored the armed guards and the reason we were meeting in a correctional facility. As I prepared to leave, Patricia reached across the table and touched my hand, the first physical contact we'd had since before her arrest. Mom, I want you to know something. The daughter you raised, the one who used to help you in the garden and bake cookies at Christmas, she's still here. Prison didn't create her, but it reminded me she existed. I hope that's true, Patricia. For your sake. Will I ever see you again? After I'm released? I thought about the question, about forgiveness and family, and the possibility of redemption even after the most terrible betrayals. Ask me in 20 years, I said. I drove home through the autumn landscape, thinking about mercy and justice and the difference between enabling and love. Patricia seemed genuinely remorseful, but I'd been fooled by my children's performances before. The money I'd given her was a calculated risk, an investment in the possibility that people could change, even after committing unforgivable acts. If I was wrong, $50,000 was a small price to pay for confirming that she was irredeemable. If I was right, it might be the foundation for rebuilding a relationship that had been poisoned by greed but wasn't necessarily dead forever. That evening, I called James and told him about the prison visit. You gave her money? He sounded incredulous. Mom, she tried to kill you. And she's paying the price for that choice. But she's still my daughter, and I'm still her mother. That doesn't excuse what she did, but it doesn't disappear either. What if she uses the money to hire someone to hurt you? What if this is all an elaborate manipulation? Then I'll deal with those consequences when they arise. But I refuse to let fear of what she might do prevent me from choosing mercy when it feels right. James was quiet for a long moment. I don't think I could be that forgiving. I'm not forgiving her, James. I'm giving her a chance to earn forgiveness. There's a difference. Some gifts are poisoned. Some gifts are antidotes to poison. Time would tell which category this one belonged to. 5 years later, I received a letter that changed everything. It arrived on a Tuesday morning in late spring, mixed in with the usual collection of bills and charity solicitations that filled my mailbox. The return address was unfamiliar, a post office box in Vermont, but the handwriting on the envelope was unmistakably Patricia's. I sat in William's study, surrounded by the books and photographs that had comforted me through the years since my family's destruction, and opened my daughter's letter with hands that trembled slightly. Dear Mom, I know I promised never to contact you unless it was an emergency, but I think this qualifies. I've been out of prison for 6 months now, and I wanted you to know what I've done with the second chance you gave me. I used your money to enroll in a community college program for addiction counseling. It turns out that many women in prison struggle with the same issues I faced: feeling worthless, making destructive choices, believing that love has to be earned through manipulation rather than given freely. I'm now working at a halfway house for women recently released from prison. The pay is terrible, the work is hard, and every day I see reflections of who I used to be. But for the first time in my adult life, I'm helping people instead of hurting them. I know this doesn't undo what I did to you. I know it doesn't erase the poison I put in your wine or the years of your life I stole with my greed. But I wanted you to know that your daughter, the real one, not the monster she became, is finally doing something that would make you proud. I won't ask to see you. I won't ask for more money or help or forgiveness I haven't earned. I just wanted you to know that your investment in my redemption wasn't wasted. I love you, Mom. I always did, even when I was too broken to show it. Patricia. P.S. I've enclosed a photograph of the garden I've started behind the halfway house. You taught me that growing things requires patience, proper soil, and the faith that something beautiful can emerge from dirt. I'm finally learning to apply those lessons to people as well as plants. The photograph showed a small but thriving vegetable garden, with neat rows of tomatoes, peppers, and herbs growing in carefully tended soil. In the background, I could see several women working among the plants, their faces peaceful and focused. I set the letter and photograph on William's desk and walked to the window overlooking my own garden, where spring flowers were blooming in the beds Patricia had helped me plant as a child. The irony wasn't lost on me. The daughter who'd tried to poison me was now growing food to nourish other people. Redemption, it seemed, could be as patient and persistent as poison if you gave it the right conditions to flourish. That afternoon, I called Harold Morrison and asked him to make some additions to my will. "Clara, are you sure about this?" he asked after I'd explained what I wanted. "After everything that's happened?" "Harold, I've spent 75 years learning that people are capable of both enormous evil and extraordinary good. Sometimes the same people demonstrate both capabilities. What about James and Sarah? How will they feel about you leaving money to Patricia?" "James and Sarah will inherit the vast majority of my estate. But Patricia will receive enough to continue her education and maintain her work helping other women rebuild their lives. And if she reverts to her old patterns? If she uses your money for destructive purposes?" I thought about the photograph of women tending plants in Vermont soil, about the careful handwriting that had once forged my signature and was now writing letters of genuine remorse. Then I'll have been wrong about people's capacity for change. But I'd rather be wrong about redemption than right about hopelessness. Harold made notes about the new bequests, then looked up at me with the expression of a man who'd spent decades watching families destroy themselves over money. "Clara, in 40 years of legal practice, I've never seen anyone handle family betrayal with your combination of justice and mercy. I've had excellent teachers in both qualities." That evening, I wrote a letter of my own. "Dear Patricia, your letter filled me with something I hadn't felt in years, pride in one of my children. I want you to know that I see the work you're doing, and I understand what it costs you to help people who struggle with the same demons you once faced. There's no greater evidence of redemption than using your worst experiences to prevent others from making your mistakes. I'm enclosing information about a scholarship fund I've established for women pursuing careers in social work and addiction counseling. You'll be the first recipient, but I hope there will be many others. The fund is administered by professionals, so you'll have to maintain your grades and demonstrate continued commitment to helping others. But if you do those things, your education will be fully paid for. I want to be clear about something. This doesn't mean I've forgotten what you did to me. I will never forget the poison you put in my wine or the months you spent planning my murder. But I've chosen to remember other things as well. The little girl who helped me plant roses, the teenager who brought me breakfast in bed on Mother's Day, the daughter who had the courage to acknowledge her mistakes and work to become better. People are more than their worst decisions, Patricia. Even people who make decisions as terrible as yours. I'm proud of who you're becoming. Your father would be proud too.
Love, Mom.
I mailed the letter the next morning, along with scholarship application materials and a photograph of my own garden in full spring bloom. 6 months later, I received a call from the director of the halfway house where Patricia worked. "Mrs. Sampson, I wanted you to know that your daughter has been accepted into the graduate program at the University of Vermont. She'll be studying clinical psychology with a specialization in trauma recovery. How is she doing? She's one of the most dedicated students we've ever worked with. The women here trust her because she's been where they are. She's saving lives, Mrs. Sampson. Every day. That Christmas, the first Christmas since my imprisonment that I felt genuinely hopeful about my family, I received a package from Vermont. Inside was a jar of honey from beehives Patricia had installed at the halfway house, along with a note. Mom, the women here have learned to tend bees as part of their therapy program. Bees, it turns out, are excellent teachers about community, hard work, and creating sweetness from simple ingredients. I thought you'd appreciate the metaphor. Thank you for teaching me that some gifts are worth the wait.
Love.
Patricia. I sat in my kitchen that evening, spreading Patricia's honey on warm bread and thinking about the strange journey that had led us from attempted murder to genuine reconciliation. It had taken years, prison sentences, and the kind of mercy that feels impossible until you discover it within yourself. Not all of my children had found their way back to humanity. Thomas was still in prison, unrepentant and bitter. Victoria had been released on parole, but had disappeared rather than face the social consequences of her crimes. I might never see either of them again. But Patricia had chosen a different path. She'd transformed her worst experiences into tools for healing others, her deepest shame into genuine service. Some families are destroyed by poison. Some families discover antidotes strong enough to neutralize even the deadliest toxins. Mine had done both. As I prepared for bed that night, I walked through the house where my children had planned to kill me, where I'd exposed their crimes, where I'd learned to choose justice over comfortable lies. Every room held memories of betrayal and redemption, of love corrupted by greed and love refined by consequence. In the dining room, I paused at the sideboard where the poisoned wine bottle had once sat like a loaded gun disguised as a gift. Now it held fresh flowers from my garden and photographs of Emma, who was growing into a confident 7-year-old with her grandfather's gentle eyes and her grandmother's determined spirit. Emma would grow up understanding that actions have consequences, that family loyalty requires reciprocal respect, and that some people can choose to become better than their worst mistakes. Those were hard lessons for a child to learn, but they were true lessons. Truth, I discovered, was more valuable than comfort. Justice was more valuable than false peace. And mercy, when it was earned rather than assumed, was the most valuable gift of all. Some mothers raise children who love them. Some mothers raise children who try to kill them. Some mothers are strong enough to survive both experiences and wise enough to know the difference between enabling and loving. At 75 years old, I'd finally learned to be that kind of mother. The poison was gone from my house, from my family, and from my heart. Only the antidote remained. Clara's story shows us that strength isn't just about fighting back. It's about knowing your worth and refusing to accept less than you deserve, no matter who's offering the alternative. If her journey resonates with you, if you've ever felt underestimated because of your age or manipulated by people who should love you, then you need our book, Reclaiming Your Peace After Pain. This powerful guide has already helped thousands of women recognize the warning signs of manipulation, set boundaries that protect them, and reclaim their power from people who see them as easy targets. Whether you're dealing with family betrayal, financial abuse, or simply feeling invisible in your own life, this book will show you practical steps to take back control and write your own triumphant ending. Don't let anyone convince you that your best years are behind you. Clara proved that the most powerful women are often the ones who've been underestimated the longest. Click the link in the description to order your copy today and start reclaiming the respect you've always deserved. What did you think of Clara's journey from victim to victor? Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and personal safety? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and remember, you're never too old to start over, and you're never too weak to fight back when it matters most. Subscribe for more stories of women who refuse to be anyone's victim.